county governments have found themselves in a gridlock. Now, last week, Treasury released some cash to the counties, but was it enough? Now, have the county governments accounted for the money sent to the devolved units? We shall have those answers right here, right now. And I'm joined by Kevin Osido, who is the Executive Director of County Governance Watch, who will help us just break down that particular conversation. You can also join the conversation on Facebook, Lookup TV, on Twitter, Lookup TV, or you can also tweet me directly at Maringa Felix. The hashtag is Counties in Focus. Kevin Osido, thank you very much for making time to come to our studios this evening. Now, first things first, there's been a vicious cycle. It seems like counties do not just get enough money from the national government, or the national government just delays on purpose. What has been happening in the counties?
Thank you so much for having me, Felix. One of the major challenges that we have had as a country in terms of delayed disbursement of funds is purely due to the fact that the national government has not fully devolved the functions. If you look at Schedule 4 functions, Schedule 4 of our Constitution, it basically presents the functions of both national and county governments. So if you look at, for instance, health, we have a huge chunk of functions that are supposed to go to the counties that are still domiciled at the national government. And that therefore means that resources that are supposed to be sent to the counties are still held at national government. If you look at, for instance, agriculture, 78% of our agricultural functions are actually devolved. But if you look at how these functions are being devolved, is being done in bits and pieces. And so that therefore means that resources that are required by counties for proper service delivery so that citizens can be able to benefit is not being done. Number two is purely based on the fact that we have not had effective laws to support the devolution of functions effectively. So we have county assemblies, taking their steps slowly by slowly. We also have issues to do with ministries, departments, and agencies, or national government having carbonized or carbonized functions that are supposed to be sent to the county. So if you look at what I'm sure you've heard people talking about funds following functions, that is purely where the narrative is coming from, that you cannot be able to have funds at a certain level of government when you do not have those functions, whereas the Constitution is very clear around when it comes to issues to do with devolution. Further to that, therefore, is also the fact that we've also not had the recommendations that were made by the Transition Authority insofar as certain capacity building for human resource at the county level. So you have a lot of the officers who are sitting at the county government having been people who transitioned from the local governments that we had before. And so the expectation was that when we devolve these functions, we also revamp and we revitalize the human resource at the county level. So issues to do with capacity building and capacity assessment has not been effectively done, whereas the report of the Transition Authority that was led by my good friend Mr. MWANNCHI, he made very strong recommendations around what we needed to do when it comes to aspect to do with devolution. So in finishing on this is also the fact that we initially had the political narrative around people at the national government who were not excited around, just the fact that Kenyans promulgated a constitution that gave people the power to exercise oversight over their resources at the county level. So those are therefore challenges that we continue to see when it comes to the devolution of functions, and therefore how resources are being sent back to the counties. But much more fundamentally is also the issue of on-source revenue, that our counties have not been able to effectively get into the aspects of raising their own revenues to support their own functions, particularly when it comes to service delivery. And then lastly is the manner in which we do our planning. The county budgeting process begins and ends with what we call the County Integrated Development Plan. But then when you look at how we do our politics vis-a-vis how we plan is very different, because you have people coming in with manifestos that say, for instance, I am going to do water revitalization in certain areas in my ward. But when you look at the previous governments, they started projects that were never finished. So when money gets into the counties, you expect that these monies are going to deal with issues of white elephants, where then citizens expect to see that projects that were started by previous governments are being continued and are being, are being completed. But then when you look at the CIDP and the budgeting process, they are quite, off in terms of how we expect is also to follow those kind of plans.
And we're actually coming to that particular conversation on own source revenue. But it also seems like when counties took effect, there was also the case of ghost workers, there was the case of mismanagement of funds from WADGO. Yeah. Has that been the main problem, or what is the main problem between the national government and the county government? Because yes, Mwangi actually with the Transitional Authority told people this is what needed to be done, yeah, and this is the direction that we needed to take. But when it comes to human resource, there's been a lot of ghost workers at the county level, and a lot of money has actually gotten lost within in thin air, if you were to say that.
Correct, and that is purely because we have failed to have proper databases of our human resource personnel at the counties. And in addition to that is the fact that what I just mentioned, where you have the manner in which we do our transition, a governor comes with his or her own officers or team, true. So you believe that people who supported you in a campaign are supposed to be the team that you carry into a government, whereas leadership and governance is not practiced in that particular manner. You have county public service boards that are, supposed to hire and fire, of course, with the approval of the county assembly and then the appointment by the governors. But that is not what we see, and that is why as you rightfully said, we have seen lots of ghost workers in counties, because people therefore ask themselves, where do I move? If, for instance, you are firing me, and I am a public officer, in the name of either a director for whatever department or a chief officer for whatever department. And so there is a very clear opportunity for us as we continue to move into our devolved form of system of governance, because now we are almost 9-10 years into devolved governance. Yeah. There are lessons that we have learned, and therefore it will mean that we put into force some of those lessons, and that institutions, for instance, the Senate is supposed to help counties in terms of where are the gaps, because that's the institution that helps in terms of oversight and accountability. We have had a lot of investment in, for instance, government, where we train public officers, we take them to Naivasha or Mombasa, or I've had some of them going to Dubai for studies. And those are resources that, are effectively being put in good use, in my view, but nobody is putting in a similar investment into the citizenry to be able to therefore exercise proper oversight and accountability. And so you're also right in saying that we have seen counties putting to waste lots of resources, and even corruption continues to be a serious challenge for county governments, because we have institutions like KSCC, we have institutions like DCI, but those institutions are not, in my view, fulfilling their effective mandates by both the Constitution and the people of Kenya. And so a lot is expected from our devolved governance form of governance. But we see a lot of resources therefore being put into counties in terms of capacity building and strengthening these institutions. We just had the budget being read 2 weeks ago.
True.
And a lot of resources therefore is being put into even constitutional commissions. But we don't hear anyone talking about civic education. How do we, instill a proper sense of accountability, a proper sense of effective mechanisms for citizens to ask questions, particularly where resources are being lost? And because our constitution is very clear in terms of how devolution is supposed to be run, so that, for instance, when you have a project in a county, you expect to have what is called a project management team, which is made up of citizens who are supposed to meet and sit and discuss how this project is going to be done. If there is a budget, you need to have a budget being appropriated by the county assemblies. so that people know that this is the amount of money that has been put in place for this particular project, and they are able to ask questions. And in addition to that, the law also requires that you publicly pronounce this project. So I'm sure, for instance, you have seen roads that are being done and there is a big billboard that says this project is being done by so-and-so, the project manager is so-and-so, and the start date is this, and the end date is this. Yeah. Those are mechanisms and measures that are being put in place because we are learning lessons. But the only challenge we have is that no one is pushing for the citizens to ask questions. For instance, why a county should be doing a stadium for 18 years, you know. I'm saying 18 years because they come, they tell us we will do this for the next 12 months, but at the 18th month, the contractor is still on the ground. The monies have already been run out, and young people are waiting, you know, to be playing on this stadium. So, so those two challenges that you mentioned in terms of ghost workers continue to be a serious challenge. So counties have been asked by institutions, including ourselves as civil society through County Governance Watch, to have a proper database, so that if I walk into a county and from just looking at the website or the touch of a button, I can be able to know who is the director in charge of water, who is the chief officer, and you also have proper mechanisms of reporting. I'm sure you've heard about performance contracting. Absolutely. That really is the essence of public service management, so that people know what is my role, what is my function. And then on corruption and mismanagement of resources, that we have proper systems to be able to ensure that checks and balances are being effectively put into practice.
But some of these county governments have even the very basic things missing. Like when you go to their websites, there's no information. Some of the websites actually stopped working. I don't know how many years ago. We've seen county governors either pass budgets for people to go for benchmarking. There is a time some MCAs were going to Tanzania for benchmarking, and they're going to benchmark in a place where one would say there's a very different structure of governance from what we have. Is it a problem of management in terms of the person who's been elected as governor, or is it just mismanagement just because people have a space and they have resources that they don't know how to make use of those resources?
That is a huge challenge, and it is purely, in my way of looking at it, mismanagement of funds. It's an ineffective way of judicious management of financial resources. But why that is happening is because we also play ping pong with our devolution. So for instance, right now, it will not be easy for you to get any MCAs in their county assemblies, because the budget monies were just released less than 4 days ago.
22nd of June.
Yes, and we expect that by end of June, today, that counties are supposed to be making their submissions back to the controller of budget, treasury, and then so that they are able to get by 1st of July the next disbursement of funds. So right now, everybody, MCAs, government officials, are either in Mombasa or in Naivasha or wherever they want to go to, including Tanzania. But why that is happening is two things. One, that they are able to burn the monies. Because as much as, for instance, the Treasury will release resources, but you realize that as when we began this conversation, you made a comment to the effect that we have delayed disbursement ranging from when we started devolution.
Yeah, true.
And that is because we have unmatched priorities. When monies get into counties, people look at, how do we burn it? Is it service delivery, basically development expenditure, or is it issues to do with salaries and basically administration expenditure. Sure. So salaries, ensuring that offices are running, and so when governors want to have their next budgets passed, for instance, they will approve. They will budget for counties to be able to go out and burn and feel good, the county assembly members particularly, so that when they come back to the counties, then they just say, yes, yeas have it, and the nays don't have it, and all that, which is not supposed to be.
What's the impact? Because when MCAs and governors just go and they're on a spending spree, one would say that it's the citizen who's not receiving services, who's left in between. But what's the impact of that? I don't know, wanton expenditure, and citizens do not have services at the county level. Maybe some of the things that were promised are not even happening. What is the impact of that wanton spending of finances?
Felix, is very dire. In fact, the basic impact is that you do not have services delivered. So it's either slow or totally no delivery of services. And that is why in some counties we still have people struggling to get water, for instance. Yet, if you look at the budget expenditures, the appropriation resources counties on water, particularly water and education, is huge sums of money, so of course including infrastructure for roads and all that for the devolved functions. But if you were to quantify, the resources that are being used for, this thing we are calling parties and wanton expenditures, is quite much more than resources that are meant for service delivery, which is really not supposed to be like that. Yesterday, of course, was a State of Devolution address by the Chair of Devolution, and I was present. I sat there, and when Governor Wambora for Embu said that all county governments now have social media accounts, I was smiling and laughing like you are doing, because some of those things are empty.
Exactly.
Access to information for citizens is really low, because counties have not fully made it possible for citizens even to look at the budgets. Yes, of course, the budgets are there, but the explanation and the understanding, because those are very big documents. Some Mama Mboga, like my grandmother in the village who is just taking care of her chicken, will not understand, even if you printed and went to her and asked her to be present at a public participation meeting. She will not understand. In fact, not so many people will go to even the websites. And so what therefore it means is that the second issue is that counties therefore need to enhance public participation by making information available, so that people know that when MCAs are going to Mombasa, they are going to Mombasa on the monies that have been approved by themselves through recommendations by the county governments, so that is money which is budgeted for that particular function, and that when they overrun or overuse that particular resource, it will cut into development resources that are supposed therefore to guarantee and ensure service delivery for the citizens. But they are taking advantage, because nobody is taking the time to get into the budget, into the main budget, and then to the what we call the annual development plans, then to the supplementary budgets, and all the way into the reports for service delivery. So that really is a huge gap, which in my view presents an opportunity for counties and county assemblies to take advantage for this wanton spending of resources.
But Kevin, one would argue that you are in that particular space where advocacy needs to be done. There needs to be a lot of civic education on the people who are supposed to be calling out some of these expenditures by the county governance officers. From County Governance Watch, what have you guys done to ensure that that citizen on the ground is educated? And when I see my governor go to Mombasa, hire 33 bodyguards for a whole month, I'm able to call them out and even take action against some of those practices.
So a few things, or rather some of the things that we have done as County Governance Watch is that we have first and foremost developed a tool which is called the County Governance Index, which assesses levels of performance of counties on health, education, agriculture, water, and infrastructure. And we consider these 5 service delivery areas as the ones that are closest to the heart of the common citizen. Not that the others are not important, but these 5 really are the core. So what this tool does is basically to look at how counties are engaging citizens to be able to be active participants in decision making and also judicious use of financial resources at the counties. Now, in addition to this, so how the tool therefore engages citizens is that we organize these citizens into what we call citizen action groups. So these action groups are put into sector working groups. So the devolved functions are almost 10 of them. So in some of the counties, about 16 counties over the 47, we have active citizen action groups that are organized according to sectors. So there is a group that is engaging on water sector, for instance. There's a group that is engaging on education. Others are doing agriculture. Others and agriculture is also very broad. Others are doing infrastructure, trying to look at how then, you know, the infrastructural development is being organized. So how we therefore work with them is that they manage to, we assist them to have very harmonious working relations with county governments, because again, with a very civil society advocacy angle, you might not get certain information. Sure. Yet the Constitution in Article 35 is very clear around access to information and all that. So we support them to be able to access this information. We break it down for them in a language and tone that they can be able to effectively understand. And then through the County Government Act, which mandates counties to ensure, of course, Section 100, that the counties put in place effective measures to participate. We also ensure that these citizen action groups get into the spaces where decisions are being made, so that, for instance, when the budget is being discussed, they are able to carry their recommendations, they are able to carry these memoranda documents or petitions to the effective offices where action is required. And in addition to this, also we organize what we call the Governors Roundtable, which is more or less like a feedback mechanism, where the government, the county government, the assembly, and also the citizens are present, and the citizens read to the governor and his or her team issues where there are challenges, and the governor and his or her team also respond back to the citizens. And this, we therefore ensure that these recommendations are actually carried into either the next phase of the CIDP, like right now we have just finished the CIDP phase as we prepare for the third generation CIDPs because of the upcoming general elections. Yeah. So we ensure that this input is fed into the CIDP. If there are issues of reprioritization, because sometimes citizens can petition certain processes, so we say, can we get a space in the supplementary budget so that we review citizen priorities? Yeah. We work with the county assemblies to ensure that these citizens also access the chambers of the assemblies when there are petitions or when their memoranda recommendations are being responded to. So these are just but some of the things which we have been able to do and therefore continue to do. But much more fundamentally is to ask governors to also put in place frameworks that are legal. For instance, what we call the County Budget and Economic Forum, which is a forum that brings together the governor. Of course, he or she chairs that particular forum. Then we have the citizens who sit in that forum. And this forum's objective is purely to look at how the budgetary allocations are being done and how these resources are being used. We have had in some counties where civil society or advocates of devolution are being compromised, either by being promised offices or being threatened by some officers like the governor, they will arrest you, or they get goons to start beating up people. So we have also come up very strongly to more or less defend those champions of devolution at that particular level. So I can say that as County Governance Watch, together with all the other organizations in the various counties, are actively involved. But the beauty of it, Felix, is that we are learning certain lessons, which in my view will be very vital in terms of improving our devolved system of governance.
And whatever it is that you suggest in those particular forums, has it been put into action?
Precisely so. We have seen some counties being very proactive to be able to put in place the recommendations. Of course, I'll tell you, for instance, in Tana River County, Governor Dado, His Excellency Major Dado has attended almost 3 sessions with these citizens. And in Tana River County, we were engaging on water service delivery, because the question that citizens were asking is, you have the largest river in almost Africa, other than River Niger, so this is Tana River.
Yes.
And how come when you open taps in Tana River County, the water is brown? Not just empty, but the water is brown, or it is too saline. You cannot drink it, And so what we've been able to do is, for instance, to effect issues to do with the county government, for example, putting in place 100 million for an additional 100 million for the water sector to ensure that, there is proper cleaning. We have the water services association there is called Tawasco, Tana Water Services Company, which therefore works very closely with the Treasury county to ensure that the resources that people pay to the counties, to the county government, goes back in terms of cleaning the water and ensuring that they have water boozers. We organized a very exciting event during the World Water Day, where even the CS for Devolution, Eugene Wamalwa, was present. And just because of that function, the county government budgeted for an additional 3 water boozers, and the Minister of Devolution and ASALS also brought in 2 more water boozers. So because of that advocacy, we saw citizens pushing for the county government to put effective measures to ensure that the citizens have water. And we now have a discussion with the county government on a water policy, because when devolution came in place, and we discussed this at the first segment of this, we're talking about devolved functions and national government functions.
Great.
We only had one policy from national government, the Water Act of 2016, of 2006 actually, which was guiding how water is being managed at the counties. But now we have counties coming up with their own policies. So I can give you very many examples, including even here in Nairobi, where we are now engaging with the county government, of course, through NMS, the deed of transfer, which was signed by the president.
The former governor.
Exactly.
At that particular point, we'll take a short break. But when we come back, there was wanton or a spending spree with COVID funds at the county level. We shall discuss that shortly after this particular break. So thank you very much for tuning in. Kindly talk to us. Tell us what you think about counties' cash crunch. What do county governments need to do to ensure that at the end of the day, service delivery is done to MWANNCHI at the ground level, but also there's management of funds at the county level. See you after the break.
Want to grow your business? Broadcast your sermon, share birthday wishes, make funeral announcements, produce adverts and documentaries? Then book and advertise with us today by calling us on +254 700 893 542
700-893-542
or email us on sales@luke-up.tv.
Thank you very much for staying with us. We are discussing counties' cash crunch. The conversation, you're getting the conversation live from Look Up TV. You can join in the conversation on Facebook, Look Up TV, on Twitter, Look Up TV, or you can also tweet me directly at Maringa Felix. I'll actually respond to your conversation. We are having Kevin Osi from County Governance Watch. And Kevin, just before we went on break, we were having a conversation about having policy discussions and having open discussions within the county level. And you were just telling us how those particular conversations have brought a difference. But the one thing that citizens are wondering is COVID-19 presented such a good opportunity for people to actually press the reset button. But it seems like for the counties, it's our time to eat, finally. What do you have to say about the COVID funds that were mismanaged? And the Auditor General actually came out very strongly saying that county governments misused the COVID funds.
Sadly so, and that's purely because of the challenge that we continue to see, that the health service delivery functions have not been fully devolved. So one of the excuses that we have had national county governments engage over is, of course, the issue of primary and secondary health, whether to fully devolve primary health care, and what therefore is primary health care. Is it only maternal child health? And if you also look at maternal child, for instance, maternal child health, you have issues to do with the Beyond Zero campaign, whose resources continue to be left largely at the national government level. The second issue that we had, which was really a serious conversation between national and county governments, was the issue about procurement of equipment, whether county governments can do it directly or just through national government Ministry of Health. And so when COVID-19 hit, which really is a sad state for us, of course it's a global pandemic, it more or less presented an excuse for counties to now want to just sporadically spend in the excuse of emergency resources. And yet, one of the good things about our constitution, Felix, is that it ensures that everything is done by the system. So for instance, procurement, you have a procurement law that says you must follow the procurement procedures. So counties and governors cannot just wake up and say, we have an emergency, so we want to prepare. And those emergencies therefore have to be very clearly embedded into the procurement law, that you have to ensure that you have either direct, they're called pre-qualified, companies, correct, and organizations, so pre-qualified suppliers, or and if you want to do direct procurement, then you have to do certain things. And we did not see counties paying keen attention to what the law of procurement requires them to do. And that is why you have seen, for instance, even the Senate summoning, quote unquote, some governors to go and respond to very difficult questions. But if we only took time to spend time to look at what the law says against what is being done, and so you look at the resources that were being spent by counties are resources that were already committed. And that is why the president in his many addresses continued to challenge counties to consider having county emergency response units, which then were expected to be multi-stakeholder, where you have private sector, you have non-governmental institutions, you have faith-based organizations, you have all these people coming together, so that counties do not spend resources at that level that are meant for services to be delivered on COVID-19. Then the question is, when you exhaust all these resources on COVID-19 and then you just spend them, very in a manner which you cannot be able to effectively explain, then what happens to the resources that are meant for service delivery? So the challenge that arose, in my view, was that we made COVID-19 look like this giant that the citizens were not even supposed to move very close to. So you are told you are, stay at home, don't touch anything, you just sanitize, wash your hands. Whereas, as we stay at home, governors and the counties are spending our resources. I think, and people are just walking by KEMSA and they are being told there is money here, come and take, True. That is purely because people found an excuse to spend public money in a manner which, in my view, was very unfortunate. And the call, therefore, that we have continued to do and say is to ask the institutions that are charged with the responsibility of taking care of public resources to act. For instance, DCI, that investigations will be done and be seen to be done within a given time frame. That EACC will also undertake its role to ensure that people are prosecuted. And that the cases that are in court, judiciary will also, exercise their mandate within a fixed time frame, so that we see people being arrested and charged, and resources that have been stolen by these COVID millionaires and billionaires are rechanneled back to the counties and to national government institutions, so that these resources can be used to make services available to the people.
But allow me to be the devil's advocate on this particular issue. We saw some county governors who were actually called out for misuse of funds, actually paraded either in the Senate or in the National Assembly, the Senate Assembly, and they were called out for their mistakes. Some governors actually were axed out of their offices. Some governors who seemed like they were supportive of the system remain to be in office. And we all know, we've had, the Auditor General has actually come out and said, this particular governor stole this amount of money, or there was mismanagement of this amount of money. Don't you think that it's a self-inflicted problem by the government now not the citizens, because the citizen has always carried the burden that, oh, you made a bad choice at the ballot. But isn't it self-inflicting by the government when some governors are actually shown the door while others continue to roam around town, and yet we know that they must mismanage the COVID funds?
You know why that is happening is two things. Why governors are going to the Senate is because the Senate is a people's voice on oversight and accountability.
Yep.
And on a number of the impeachment processes that we have seen, particularly the successful ones, you have had people asking whether there was public participation process. That is a pure constitutional requirement that the process of impeachment by the Constitution allows for the citizens' voices also to be heard, and that when the governor is also being put at the defense bench, that you are also able to present evidence, and this evidence you are allowed to present witnesses who can say, I benefited from county contracts and I delivered on these particular issues because either it was advertised. You know, for proper procurement processes, the first thing that you have to do is to create the need. What is the need? True. And the second thing is that you are required to advertise. Did you openly advertise, or you just single-sourced certain people? True. And even for procurement, our Public Procurement and Disposal Act is very clear around when you single source. And that's one of the avenues through which you single source is on emergencies. Yeah. Now, when COVID-19 happened, we did not rush to look at the emergency aspect of it. The county governments rushed to look at the possibility of corruption, and so that if we narrow down to emergency aspects, then we look at whether there are laws. For example, have our county assemblies passed laws to do with emergencies and how we dispense on emergency issues? Because emergency is not just an emergency. True. When you're even building up a house, you do assessment and you ask yourself, what if one of the pillars drops? What do we do? Yeah. And so I think that one of the good things therefore that happened with the COVID-19 and is continuously happening is the fact that we have learned certain lessons, and that even on the impeachment processes, like the Wajir one, the gentleman was purely impeached on a health issue, and people were saying, you said you are going to, supply unga. But how is it that a bale of unga, which is, for example, 900 bob, for you it was 2,900, and they were able to...
But honestly, right now, even when we talk about Wajir, we have two governors. Yeah. The High Court in Meru said Governor Mohammed remains to be in office, yet the deputy governor had already been sworn in. So in my yes, we'd want to say maybe the governor did this, the governor did not do this. We have two governors already in office, and they are, I believe they're taking home the salary of two governors. And where do we leave the space for the citizens to actually come out and say, national government, mnatuchanganya pia nyinyi?
Because the matter is in court, I may not delve into the details, but the minimum threshold basically is the impeachment process. Did it meet that threshold? And I think that was the biggest discussion at the Senate, and people were asking, what is public participation? What's the threshold of a county assembly is going out, or do you just go and pick your friends and then they sign for your petition? And the beauty of this is that, Felix, we will therefore have what I would call a precedence on petitions and impeachment, rather precedence on impeachment of governors, so that now the county assemblies and the Senate will be able to effectively learn lessons and pass proper policies to put in effect the articles on the Constitution that deal with impeachment, so that we're able to fill these gaps. But however, the two governors have a right to reply, and they have therefore the right to go back to the Court of Appeal, which is the next apex before the Supreme Court, to seek an appeal and interpretation of what this means. At least I know that the governors who are facing an appeal process and have salary, and so that therefore deals with a number of issues in terms of human resource. Of course, I also know that the governor who has been sworn in cannot just send away the officers who are working with the governor who has been impeached. There is a process that has to follow through, so that everybody's Article 49 issues, either you've been arrested and charged or found guilty, you know, there are certain bare minimums and leverages, therefore, that the Constitution give to you. But as you rightfully said, citizens should not look at it like national government is confusing us. The service delivery is a purely citizen interest in devolution, and what the responsibility of the government is to ensure that those services are delivered. So that even as the matters are in court and governors are fighting, of course, politicians, during the day they will fight, but at night they are, you know, feasting together.
They are having
the common objective should be that services are being delivered, so that whether it's the deputy governor that has been sworn into office, that swearing in should not affect the fact that water is being, you know, delivered, education bursaries for kids who require those resources are being, you know, given to them. It should not affect salaries of officers who are working with the governor who is being impeached and all that.
Great. And now on that particular bit, the COVID funds were misused. 2 weeks ago, we saw counties in Western region put on a lockdown again. Again, the reason as to what many people say, it was the president and the former prime minister and the deputy president who decided to go and do a Madaraka Day in the Western region, and now people are suffering. But the county governors asked whether they could be allowed by the Ministry of Health to import their own vaccine. Isn't that another scandal in the offing?
That is beyond their mandate. I would call it extra virus, because you have specific functions. Remember that, and maybe before I talk about this, I go back to the president, because you mentioned the president. I think some of the actions by the president are very irresponsible. For instance, on issues of COVID funds, in all the summits, the discussions, part of which we were actively involved, the president made pronouncements that counties need to publicly declare, you know, the people, the companies that benefited or companies that are pre-qualified, and put them on a portal in their websites. We have not seen that happening. So the counties therefore should and must be able to exercise what in governance we call open contracting, that you put it in the open, in that you know, public gallery, and anyone who is qualified, particularly on emergency issues, should be able to you know, benefit or to be given the mandate to supply. Because, like, for instance, some of the cases that we have seen being dispensed are people who did not have capacity. Somebody is very strong in selling bicycles, but then how do you get a
They are
tender?
selling masks.
Exactly, to sell masks and sanitizers, and your past profile of the company really does not show, you know, how you want to be able to supply issues that are related to vaccines, so that then whatever pronouncements that the president made, we should be able to progressively see counties, you know, being at the forefront to put them in effect and in force, and institutions of governance also that have been mandated by our constitution should also follow those pronouncements, because in some jurisdictions, Felix, they are called executive orders. And when a president of a republic speaks, then you don't question. If he says jump, you ask how high, sir or madam. If he says can you go down, you ask how low should I go beyond the ground, you know. But here in Kenya, impunity is a serious challenge, and that is why governors now are bearing this particular you know, excuse to want to have request for an opportunity to, you know, import vaccines.
But they are asking for something that, in all honesty, should have been done by the government way early, so that now even this whole issue of locking down some counties are still operating normal. You saw, like, when the red zone, Nairobi, Machakos, Kajiado, the metropolitan area had been locked down, the other counties were just going on with their activities. The simple thing that these governors are asking for is, could you just, if not allow us to import our own vaccines, why can't the national government again now vaccinate everybody, so that now people are tired with these curfews, people are tired with these lockdowns, and that's the simple thing that they're asking about. But there's also been a constant violation of Chapter 6 of the Constitution that talks on leadership and integrity, and that has been seen from the presidency to now the governors. Why is it so hard for county governors to actually be accountable for their actions?
So what happens is that when you want to import vaccines, for instance, as a county, you have, of course, issues to do with intergovernmental relations. So we have a technical committee that then is supposed to get into the sporray of engagements, because as a county called Kisumu, you cannot directly engage with China on issues, or Brazil, or where is this
India.
other one?
India, where the COVAX,
you know, it's not, then you bypass national government, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because we also have consulates and embassies in these countries. That is a conversation that only the national government, through the ministry, then, okay, let me call them relevant ministries. So whether it's health or foreign affairs, should be able to get involved in. As we speak right now, we do not have a framework for counties to engage with external governments. And that is why I'm sure His Excellency the President, even on his address, was it yesterday?
Yesterday,
yeah,
yes.
Came up and said, we have a plan to vaccinate millions of Kenyans. You know, whether the plan is or infeasible is not the question, but the intention becomes very clear that Kenya has a plan to be able to boost the vaccination role. So counties, therefore, are being given an opportunity to come into a conversation, because remember, even the resources that you are going to use to import these vaccines are going to come from Treasury. Because our county governments have not had an effective way of on-source revenue. The kind of, indicators that we are having are quite low. So unless if they had enough resources in their county treasuries to effectively engage, then we look at what is the legal mechanism for you to directly engage and import. Because, for instance, look at it this way: if we had County X doing the Chinese vaccine, we had County Y doing Johnson & Johnson, then we have another one doing
Sputnik 5,
or AstraZeneca, or whatever it is called. And we have Kenyans moving from left, right, and center, you know, without a proper conversation around the efficacy of these vaccines. So what the president, I'm sure, was saying yesterday is, we want to identify a vaccine that works with our climate, a vaccine that responds with to our needs, and also looking at the resources that we have. And so county governments should be having a conversation with the national government on how can we take an advantage. Like you mentioned, the red zone. And also right now we have Lake region, at least the 13 or 14 counties in that region. The 13 counties around the Lake region economic bloc, doing number 2 after Nairobi. So the question then is, how do we get an advantage over the other counties to benefit from these vaccines? And that, in my view, should be the way in which that kind of conversation.
Great. And now in 2020, Embu County collected 78% of the projected on-source revenue. Again, Wajir comes back again. It's collected 31.9%. Why does it seem so hard for these counties to raise their own revenue, yet they're the same counties that give their projected revenues? Why is it so difficult for the counties to do on-source revenue?
Yeah, of course, if you tell a governor to give you projections through their ministry, or rather departments of finance, of the treasuries, they will give you ambitious projections, and those projections are being given based on what the counties have. So basically the asset basis. If you look at Kenya, we are such a rich country. You go to any corner of this country, you have a bulk of avenues where you can be able to translate them into resources. So you go to Kisii, for instance, you have the soapstone that is happening there. You go to the Lake region, you have a lot of fisheries and fishing that is taking place. You go to the coast, the port industry, and you go to Lamu, you have Lapset, and you go to Taita Taveta, you have all these natural minerals that are, But now the challenge, therefore, so when they do the projections, they are thinking like I'm speaking. So they imagine that you can just walk in and pick gold or diamond from somewhere and then you sell it. But they forget the fact that you need to translate this into value. So what is the value addition that counties are doing to be able to boost their own source revenue? We have not done that. So for instance, in Lake region, we don't even have a fishing industry.
So what needs to be done? So
what therefore needs to be done, because on source revenue, and I'm glad we are talking about this, because I also came with a notebook that talks about, this is by CRA, and it's talking about counties on-source revenue training guidelines.
Maybe my camera person can actually zoom into that. Yeah.
So this is a training guideline that has been done by CRA, and I've benefited as one of the trainers to be able to train the mawaziri wa county, the CECs, the chief officers for counties, MCS. We have had 2 trainings in Mombasa together with the CRA to be able to enhance county revenue allocation mechanisms. Now, what we do not understand from on-source revenue is that the Constitution gives us almost 110 different streams. But what counties have, spent their energies and invested on are on things like land rates. So land rates are, for instance, what we have seen governors saying, we are giving waivers to people to come and pay. If you owe the county, we give you waivers. Counties need to, because you ask the question, what do we need to do? Is to develop a database of land owners in the counties. And that therefore means that county assemblies also need to pass laws that respond to that requirement of counties, which they have not done. Now, when you talk about things like, because the other 4 streams are fees that are charged for services that are delivered by counties. We have things to do with charges, that are charged, and then taxes, where, like, for example, in some counties you see revenue officers working with things and they are troubling mama mbogas. In Nairobi, one of the things, yes, exactly. So SES is actually another one where you move from one county and you are carrying goods. You have to stop, they check what you have, and then they tabulate, and then you pay. So county assemblies need to pass those laws to support that kind of action. Because somebody who does not, somebody who wants to create trouble with a county will actually carry, ngamia from Taita Taveta, or rather from Tana River, and get to Garissa, and you want them to pay. It says, and they ask you on what law, what is the basis that, and ultimately, imagine moving from Taita Tana River all the way to Nairobi. How many counties are you bypassing? And so all that money that is being collected is on source. But we have not seen how counties are also sharing. So we need to have a mechanism, and counties need to come up with mechanisms that support these kind of actions, because that is not existing. Of course, there are some counties that have done very well to be able to pass these laws. Then the third thing is what we call evaluation role. That county assemblies will not delay in the passage and appropriating this evaluation role, because evaluation role is what gives the county assemblies the power to take charges from people who have failed to pay land rates, for example. But in the absence of a proper evaluation role, then the question is, on what basis are counties doing this particular issue? And then lastly is for us to identify the assets that I spoke about and invest in boosting them. Because remember that when you have, for example, industries in your locality, it means that you are also creating rooms for employment creation. So the number of people who will, for example, be employed by a soapstone industry around Kisii or a fisheries farm in the Lake region, you expand that base for tax collection by creating employment. So the more people you have employed, the more people you will be able to tax, and then the higher the kind of revenue that you'll be able to plow back to your county.
Just have 1 more minute to clear this particular conversation. Last week, Laikipia governor said BBI is the only way to meet some of these revenue loopholes that have been there. It's devolution has been in existence for almost going to 10 years, but there just seems to be a problem. What is the one thing that you could say is the only solution to averting the county's cash crunch that we keep seeing over and over again? In a minute.
The one thing is that the National Treasury should commit to sending monies timely to counties. Like right now, 2 weeks to actually almost 5 days to the end of the financial year. What can you do? And then number 2 is proper interagency collaboration. So for instance, the county treasuries should be speaking very closely to the National Treasury, and that conversation should also be very close to the county assembly budget committees, and also the what we call the national government treasury and the controller of budget, because the controller of budget is the person who gives the green light for counties to spend. And the county assembly passes proper laws. So if they delay in terms of the county appropriation laws, then that delay is going to take place. If the auditor, the controller of budget also says you are not spending, that is really the end of it. So proper interagency collaboration and conversation should be enhanced, and IFMIS also should be seen to be working, because how then you deal with issues to do with pending bills and all that is of course proper goodwill, and then you must have a system. So counties must develop a system that also integrates within the various departments in a manner therefore that can be able to detect loopholes and effective measures of raising them and then dealing with those particular loopholes.
Great. I think that's a good point to actually end this conversation. Counties to have proper systems to ensure that this whole issue of missing out on cash is actually sorted. Kevin Osido, thank you very much. So we've just been speaking to Kevin Osido, who's the Executive Director at County Governance Watch. He's also a governance consultant. The conversation has been Counties in Focus with me, Felix Maringa. At this particular point, I want to thank everyone who's made this particular conversation successful, from my cameraman to the people in the gallery. Thank you very much for making this particular conversation successful. And to you, our viewer, till next time, for now, it's bye-bye.
We value your feedback and welcome your complaints about our programming and operations. Feel free to get in touch with us through 0700 893 542 or send us an email to views@look-up.tv. We can't wait to hear from you.